This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed. I'm Daniel Hawkins, your host, and as we continue in this time moving into the summer, I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Lance Marshall, senior pastor at First United Methodist Church of Fort Worth. Lance, thanks for being here.
I made the cut. Finally. I've been waiting so long. I've been watching all these pods get warmed and wondering when is it my turn.
The answer is episode 56.
Yes.
So apparently you are Brian Urlacher or something like that. Right?
You know, very wonderful. I just had my Bill Bates birthday. So
okay. Well,
yeah,
there you go.
For
there
sure.
You go. September's coming for me for the Bill Bates birthday, and so it'll be fascinating, exciting. Lance, tell me a little bit. What you got here?
It's nothing special. You asked me to bring something that's representative of who I am, and the nerds are immediately going to know this is not how you use a Chemex. You don't actually put beans into the Chemex. But basically, it's another way of brewing coffee that if you have fancy coffee, it tastes delicious. So up here, you put a very particular paper filter, and then you grind up your beans to a certain amount of coarseness, and then you measure out the amount of water by grams and temperature and pour it over slowly. And I just put beans in here in the bottom so that it would look a little more interesting than an empty Erlenmeyer flask or Florence flask, or whichever one is flat on the bottom. And so the thing about me is, I'm a coffee guy.
Yeah.
I'm like I have to switch to decaf by about 9 in the morning because I'll just drink coffee all day. And so I love it. Yeah. I love not only the way it tastes, but I love the social and the community of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've done since the very beginning of ministry is have some version of I want to have a cup of coffee with Lance as a check mark on our attendance forms.
Okay.
And so I've always made it very easy for anybody at the first stage of engagement of the church. Hey, you want a cup of coffee? I will meet you somewhere. I will buy you coffee. I would just love to get to know you.
That is so good. Coffee and ministry go hand in hand.
It's an indispensable. Have your coffee and have your Bible, and it's all you need.
Right. Amen. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
So it's a fancy pour over.
It's exactly that.
Okay. Lance, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All jokes aside, we are proud to have you back in this room. During 2020, you were not a stranger to this room in lots of interesting attempts at creating digital content. And
That's right.
Which makes it fascinating that we are talking about failure today.
That's right. That's what I wanted to talk about.
That's what you wanted to talk about. To be clear, I didn't say we're inviting Lance on the podcast because he's an expert.
If Lance is coming,
in failure.
we got to talk about failure.
Right. No.
I have that stink around me just as I walk into a room.
You are wearing burnt orange. I'm just saying. No, I'm excited that you're here, and I think it's a fascinating conversation that, frankly, far too often we're too uncomfortable to have.
Absolutely.
And you know, our journey through life and ministry, we kind of started about the same time. We've been doing this for about the same amount of time. And as I was prepping for today, we were church planting at the same time. We're a little,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oof, okay.
But that's okay. We were church planting at the same time.
We were.
Right. I remember about a decade ago, Gary Lindley taking both of us and our spouses out to dinner to go, hey, let's do this thing.
And both of those churches are flourishing right now. They're huge.
Absolutely. They're gigantic.
They absolutely exist and can be visited by you.
Right. Of course. Yes. There's a thriving second campus on the west side of Keller. And
that's right.
7th Street has the west side of 7th Street
let's talk about failure,
expression. Yeah. Well, it's funny. In prepping for that, I saw these pictures.
Oh, what a baby!
Yeah, isn't that cute?
Yeah,
that's what 30-year-old Daniel looks like, and here's
so
Lance
optimistic
at 30.
Yay!
I have to say, the bravery to rock the hat and the stash.
Yeah,
it says, "I am a man who is planting a church in West 7th Street." Right. Lots has changed since then.
We all make choices.
We all do.
We all make choices.
We all do. It is all good.
It was one of those things where it's like, do I want to go my whole life and never have had a handlebar mustache? No. No. At some point, it was a short-term commitment. I'm glad. Let's talk about failure.
Right. Well, and what is hilarious? I looked back at the conference website, did a search for the launching of our two campuses, and they announced them on consecutive days in November of 2014.
Yeah.
And that was the picture they chose.
I'm sure because I gave it to them.
Sure. Yeah. Now, I do have to note, in the headlines on the conference website, Vance must have liked you better.
Okay.
Because mine said, Keller UMC launches satellite campus in West Keller. And yours the next day said, Lance Marshall is launching.
Yeah.
And
Which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about failure, because I feel like an important role that I can play in our larger connection is to be identified as a failure. Because it was always Lance Marshall's doing this thing. And it was a situation, for those who were around in 2014, a lot of expectations got tied to it. A lot of publicity got tied to it before it had earned any of those things. And so was my name. And so when it fails, it wasn't like anyone was going, who was attached to that?
Right.
Like Lance failed. And so that's one of the roles that I feel like when we talk about failure, surviving failure, remaining resilient, learning, adapting, changing, I do so with making it very clear. I've said on multiple occasions that I think I could be wrong. I think I am the most visible and public failure in the modern history of our annual conference.
Okay.
And so I own that. And
what was fascinating is as we were doing that at the same time, both of our things went crash and burn. And all of that you have named in terms of what you felt externally, I felt internally as well.
Yeah.
Right. My name wasn't attached to it in quite the same way, but there was this level of, that was the season of, where it felt like the annual conference was kind of pushing this golden boy kind of thing. Right. And we will do these new amazing things. We're going to do second campuses in a way nobody else has. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody else fails at it. And so, but surely we can get it right.
Yeah.
But as I look back a decade later, no experience was more formative in shaping who I am today than that failure. But it's fascinating. And I love that you name failure at, like, you're clear about it, right?
Yeah.
And that you name it, because so many people I talk to, like people who care about me, go, no, it wasn't a failure. No, I'm like, no, like I need to own that it was a failure.
no, and
like,
so do you.
It set out to do this thing.
Yeah.
And it didn't do that thing. Now, it did 17 other things that were good, and we can name that too, right? But at the same time, it doesn't have 500 people in it on a Sunday morning today, the way that all the projections said it should, right?
Because if you have numbers, you're a success. That's a whole nother topic of conversation, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to talk about failure is because I could not be more excited about this moment in culture and the way the United Methodist Church is positioned to share good news and to be good news for the world. And our generation, more senior generations, younger generations, I think when people talk about what they wish their community was like, what they wish their culture was like, what they wish their individual family and friendships were like, I think the United Methodist Church has done and been those things faithfully and in all different contexts for a long, long, long time. So we are extremely well positioned to be and share good news. We have so much opportunity, and opportunity is always going to involve taking risks, trying new things, stretching yourself, being brave. And the shadow that follows all of that is the possibility of failure. And how often and easy is it for any of us, people who are in ministry leadership context as clergy or lay people who are in business or academic context, how easy is it for us to not try,
right?
Because we're afraid, what happens if I fail? And I think one of the things that you and I uniquely happen to be positioned to do is to share, not only did I survive on a personal level,
Certainly.
not only was that not the end of ministry for me.
Thanks be.
Yeah, right. Not only was that not the end of the road. Well, you tried that and you failed, so go, goodbye. We're no longer interested in your calling. We did learn something. And people so quickly want to jump to the, okay, well, what did you learn? What did you get out of it? And I have to, one of the things I try to advocate is like, no, like let yourself feel the failure feelings.
Yeah.
Let yourself feel the disappointment and let yourself feel that you didn't die.
Right.
And then now you get a chance to try again.
Well, and what is fascinating, so I'm an Enneagram 3. I don't know if you're an Enneagram
I'm an 8
guy.
with an 8 wing.
Okay. So you are absolutely certain at all times. But as a 3, I needed to feel like I had never cared about something deeply and not excelled at it.
Yeah.
Like I was 30 years old, and anything I cared about, I had succeeded in.
You oomphed your way into it.
I'd oomphed my way into it, and yet this was not something I could conquer on my own. I was convicted that God had called me into doing it. I think we did meaningful work, and I gave it everything I had, and yet it didn't meet the goals that we had set for it that were markers of sustainability. And so to wrangle with that, to wrestle with where is God in this, and where is God pulling me and inviting me into a deeper trust, right?
Yeah.
Was stuff I needed to sit in. I needed to let it die, right?
Yeah.
I've got people in my family, like, I can't have this conversation with my dad because his protection mechanism is so strong. He's like, no, you didn't fail. No. You know, like he's got to.
Don't put that on yourself.
Right. It's like, no, I need to own
Yeah.
that it failed. And if I don't own that, it doesn't have the same power for God
because it's still the thing that's out there scaring you.
Yeah,
I didn't fail. Well, then failure is still a specter.
Still here. Yeah.
That scares you.
And without that death, we can't have the resurrection, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of...
Ooh, you're preaching now.
Right. That ability
Mark it, Dustin. How long did we get into it before resurrection came in? That's what I want to hear. That's what I want on this pod.
That's it. So I think that, like, you're right. Sometimes we need to sit in it. Sometimes we need to let it be. And our fear of failure, right? What does Jesus say more than anything else in the Gospels?
Yeah.
Do not be afraid, right? And in our cultural context, failure is one of those biggest things that we are afraid of. And so we can, we can sometimes never try, but sometimes we can subconsciously sabotage our own thing.
Yeah.
So that we have an excuse as to why it failed at the back end. Like, I wasn't fully invested. I didn't care. Like, well, that wasn't super important to me.
Which implies, then success would have been right there otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to highlight about both your project and my project, which, by the way, not the only failure on my resume, that project. It's not like, I failed one time. I got some good ones to talk about if we want to dig into it. But the new church plant that you endeavored in, spent years of your life working on, same for me, they were good ideas. They were not bad ideas. Yeah. So often people want to say, well, it was a bad idea. Someone else, it's like, no, it was a good idea. God was present in it.
Right.
We prayed over and for it and with it deeply.
Yeah.
We invested resources. We gave our heart and talents, and it didn't work out.
Right.
And so it's important to not just I try to hide behind, it was, this or that or the other or something wrong. No, just begin to let into your heart the truth that you cannot control the outcome.
Yeah.
All you can control is your faithfulness and your willingness to be deeply faithful, the best of your ability and with the greatest of your discernment. And God's ultimately going to take care of fruitfulness.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we can't control is, but like by fruit, I mean in this way, at this time.
Yeah, we want to
place.
specify
Like,
exactly
I
how
get
that
it.
looks.
I'm fruitfulness means this number of people in this place at this time working towards a capital campaign, right? Like that's the fruitfulness I'm looking for. And so I think that's an important thing to do, is to not, like you're saying, don't hide behind, I just didn't try hard enough, or the self-sabotage, or it was someone else's bad idea, et cetera. No, just own the fullness of, we don't control the outcome. And that's never going to be the case. And become like, there's so much discipleship growth for ourselves and any listeners in that full acceptance of, man, I don't control the outcome of this.
Yeah. One of the things that has been helpful for me over the last decade to see, right? Because we do so deeply want to define what fruitfulness looks like, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a level of which ministry is this ambiguous thing. What is discipleship, right? We have some markers of discipleship, but we live in a world that likes to count widgets and produce different things. And so, we tend to be numerically driven. But one of the beauties of maintaining relationship and staying connected is, like, some of the kids that were brought into Keller West from families that had maybe been Christmas, Easter people historically, or maybe not been deeply committed Christians during that time. They're now graduating from high school, right? They're now going through confirmation. They're like, their families experienced that time, even though it was not what we wanted it to be on paper.
Yeah.
As a time where they said yes to God, and that yes has continued in different expressions, in different places, in different church communities over the years, but it became a place where people said yes to God.
Yeah.
And that's a meaningful thing, right? Even though it didn't end up with the type of success we had hoped for, right? Or we had put on paper, when you're writing your business plan or whatever at the front end
goals.
of that thing. Yeah, the goals at the front end. So I'm curious, you named that failure has met you in ministry and in life, any number of different places and ways.
Absolutely.
And I think if we're willing to be honest with ourselves, all of us can say that. Professionally, sitting from the outside looking in, one of the things I found intriguing with your work connected to First Fort Worth, right? You're now the senior pastor there, but the new faith community that Lance leads idea was one that the church was committed to, right? And y'all iterated probably 3 or 4 times,
right,
before kind of the success as you had initially defined it,
right,
kind of came into being. What did you learn from failure and iteration and that kind of sticking to the call, even if the expression didn't, meet your initial expectations?
Yeah, so to give background very shortly to help people understand the answer, we had originally had the vision of starting what you would think of as a new faith community in an area of Fort Worth that was experiencing a lot of residential and business development, and it was mostly geared towards apartment living and just kind of that urban revitalization mindset. And one of the things that was an operating thesis behind the plant was that one of the reasons this can be a good outcome for ministry is because the existing church is an extremely historic, centrally located downtown cathedral. And so the assumption was, well, that's not going to engage the congregation, the potential congregation, the mission field that exists in this area. So we're going to do something new to meet them. 100% very reasonable. And one of the things that I was surprised to learn, and other people who were surprised in participating in this work with me to discover, was that when we went and were present in the mission field, doing the kind of things that you do to be on the ground, meeting people, regardless of your ministry context, just get out the doors and meet real people where they really are. One of the most meaningful things that I did was just go to the Trinity Trails, which is a very popular exercise and running location and in downtown Fort Worth area and in this mission field, and we just set up tables and have free water and snacks for joggers and got great conversations out of it. Did not get one new church member or baptized Christian out of that work. What I did get was a lot of people who I didn't realize were aware of the existing cathedral and were interested in it or had some connection with it, etc. Basically, one of the things that we thought was an obstacle to ministry was not an obstacle to ministry. It was really, that was a really powerful learning that came out of it. So when you are asking the question, what are some of the things that were a part of the iterative process? One of them was listening.
Yeah,
it was listening to the mission field and to the people that we're trying to reach. One of the things that we learned when we listened was that this area has a lot of apartment dwellers. That's true. However, it's still not New York City or Chicago. They are apartment dwellers, but they still have cars. And for a lot of them, they are not making long-term commitments to urban living. It's a short-term adventure for a period of time in their life as they transition career-wise, et cetera. And so they're not looking to form lifetime commitments. And I found that in conversation as well with other churches of other backgrounds that were doing ministry work in the same area. And a lot of them, the people who we were meeting in that mission field who did desire a faith community, it was not an obstacle to them to get in the car and drive.
Okay.
Right. So it didn't have to be the urban thing right down the street, et cetera. Again, we're just listening to the mission field, learning more and more about it in a way that's hard to do until you're really boots on the ground. You can have an outside strategy. When you get there, started to realize things were different. And so we then started we had transitioned that offsite location into an evening service at the church. It made a lot of sense on paper and in conversation with people. But one of the things that we really discovered was that the people that were most interested in this work, this is a decade ago now. So this is when the millennials are having younger children. When you think of millennial right now, make sure you're thinking of a parent with kids up until junior high. Right? That's the millennial generation
We're
now.
40 and we have gray hair.
Gray beards and are bald, right? Just because we played Super Nintendo doesn't mean that we don't also check our 401ks. Right? That's a millennial life now. And so we realized that a huge need for them was ministry with families and kids and family ministry. And to the point where the question was, we love the worship that's taking place here. We love the outward focus. We love the way in which this is church that has an eye towards you may not have been at church before. However, we're actually looking for the full thrust of children's ministries, et cetera. So long story short, the iterations in the learning came out of, if we do things here at home base on a Sunday morning with a different mindset, focus, and mission field in mind, we can succeed in our goal of reaching new people. And it doesn't have to have the structural or conceptual framework of new church plant in order to do that work. So we transitioned it into something that then started almost as a Sunday school class, and then for a while became something that was one of the fastest growing things in Methodism, and turned into what now might seem to look like a contemporary worship service, but in the bigger context of the story of the life of the church is an exercise in listening, failing, iterating, listening, failing, trying again, and overcoming lots of different hurdles, challenges, setbacks, and differences, all rooted in listening. Each time you engage with the community, listen what's out there. And that was the real root of something that did ultimately bear the fruit that we were hoping to see.
Yeah. That listening is so incredibly powerful, right? It spoke in our context too. We were very convicted that in the western side of Keller, we ended up planting 10 minutes from the main campus. We were not far. We were doing the elementary school church plant thing.
Sure. Part
of our initial assumption was we'd take, because we had about 20% of the worshiping congregation who lived in the West Keller neighborhood.
Right.
We thought we'd take those folks, transplant them into the new thing, grow it and flourish it, and kind of do all of that kind of thing.
Good idea.
Good idea. Turns out our existing folks didn't want to go, largely, outside of those who
They
had
already liked the thing they already liked.
Yeah, they've made a choice on purpose, right? We had thriving kids and student ministry at the main campus, and that was part of what fed their spirit and their soul, right? And so one of the things that we experienced again and again in the boots on the ground in our neighborhoods, going to all those community I went to so many fall festivals, and we played Plinko at every community gathering we could think of. We chatted with every kind of person we could. But in that, so many folks said, "Tell me about the heart of this church," and then would come to our West Campus once, and then go, "Oh, you have this with all the bells and whistles too?"
I'll drive 10 minutes.
Then I'll drive 10 minutes for that. Yeah. And so that idea of listening well, I think the plant failed, but the church was better for the long haul.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think keeping that in mind for all of us as we engage in this process. I know we for several years had the $10,000 grants at the annual conference level, right, to start new faith communities, and for so many churches, $10,000 wasn't. It's a good amount of money, but it's not.
Doesn't solve every problem.
It doesn't solve every problem, right? But for so many of our places that had just never hit go on the idea that they felt God was calling them to, it provided that little bit of a spark, right?
Yeah.
And I know in Meridian, where we served, we had an idea. We applied for one of those. We sparked it. We launched it. And it worked for a season, and then it didn't work for a season, right? But the church learned, hey, we can do new things, right? And so it was one of those things that when we came a year later to raise a year's worth of budget in cash to renovate some stuff, they're like, we can do this. They believed in themselves again in a new way through failure, right? Not through success, right? But through
one of the metaphors that I love to use in thinking about this is the metaphor of strengthening your muscles, right? So like the experience that our entire congregation went through, First Methodist, all the other folks, it was an opportunity to really flex the muscles of thinking about the mission field, being evangelists in the community, thinking and getting outside the doors, being active and engaging. And so what you're describing that was happening in those two communities you served is those congregations felt their muscles get stronger. Those muscles of we can do new stuff, we can try new stuff. And so many people forget, myself included, that the process of getting stronger, of working out, of what happens the next day after you go and lift really heavy for the first time. How do you feel? Right?
You hurt.
There's some burn to it, right? There's a little bit to it. And so often we feel like, well, I tried that new thing, I did that new thing, it didn't work out, I will then therefore stop.
Yeah.
And incumbent with that are these emotions of doubt or shame or regret or frustration that are the now stopping me and creating roadblocks to trying it again. And I want so badly when I'm talking to my own colleagues in ministry to help them understand. And you are expected to fail at things over and over and over again.
Right.
And I look at that and experience that as the byproduct of you flexing these muscles of creativity and optimism and hope and joy and mission and evangelism, the outbreaking good news of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. That when you say, yeah, we did so and so and it didn't work, okay, that's you flexing those muscles.
Yeah.
My failures include things like organizing an entire community participation in or a volunteer mission opportunity for a community event, and none of my people showed up. Zero of them actually came. Failure. I organized it was a really interesting idea that was a spiritually based study on some business and development practices. So it was geared toward professionals. It was basically like a professional lunch, and we're going to read some of these books on improvement and development, but we're going to take a spiritual and faith development aspect to it, and I'm going to engage with professionals over the lunchtime hour.
Right.
Got a bunch of people who were like, yes, this is something I would love to do. Had one, like 15 people showed up. It was really cool. Was advertising it externally on things like Meetup and stuff like that. Second week, nobody's there until 5 minutes until it starts. And then the worst possible thing happened. One person showed up. Because if nobody shows up, I can just go home.
Right.
Right. And lick my wounds. But one person shows up, and now they're expecting a crowd, and I'm expecting a crowd, but it's just us. And so anyway, it's so easy to to experience those things and say, well, I'm just not going to do that again.
Right.
It doesn't feel good.
Right.
Right. And instead, the framework of, man, I'm just working out these muscles.
Yeah.
This is what it's like. And I'm getting stronger and stronger and stronger in my ability to listen to the mission field, to work with invested partners, to figure out what we need to try, and my own resilience and capacity to try and do is getting greater as well. So when I talk to ministry colleagues at our church and other church, I say, I've got really good news. I have a guaranteed pathway to ministry success for you, for your church, for us, for our church. I have a guaranteed pathway to ministry success, growing and impacting more people, sharing the good news of the kingdom of God in a way that will impact lives forever. It's a guaranteed success. And the pathway is keep trying stuff and don't stop.
Right.
And know that 5, 10, 15 things are going to try and not work.
Right.
And you're just going to keep trying, and then you will hit, and it will work, and it will all be worth it.
Yeah.
It is a guarantee. I'm just sorry to say that that's what it's going to cost.
But that is so incredibly true, right? And, if we aren't willing to flex those muscles, if we're not willing to, I think about, so my exercise pattern is probably indicative of my courageous leadership pattern as well, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll go through for 18 months, I will, work out 5 times a week and do it like crazy and be in the best shape of my life, right?
Mm-hmm. And then you get an injury.
And then you get an injury or something and you stop.
Yeah, you get sick for a week or two. Yeah.
And then 5 years later, I'm an offensive lineman instead of a tight end, and I have to start over again. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if I had just been consistent the whole time, right? Even with the willing to, but it would have been a whole different story. But also the joy of that process is those first couple of workouts, every time I restart the cycle, they suck.
Yeah, it's tough work.
They are terrible. And yet, you can't have the 10th if you don't have the first. You mentioned a little bit earlier the shame spirals that happen, those kind of internal dynamics. We've got about 5 minutes left in the pod. We've talked a lot about church leadership, but I think this leadership and our own internal kind of what failure does to our spirit and soul kind of go hand in hand, right? We can't embrace our willingness to professionally show up again and again and again and again and try it without doing some of that internal work.
Yeah.
As our designated, what was your title that you gave yourself? The most public failure in the
the most visible and public failure in the modern history of the annual conference.
Okay, there you go. What would you speak as somebody who as a colleague and a friend experiences you as a person of spiritual health and well-being? What would you say in terms of soul care and soul keeping? For all of us in ministry who are, hearing this and trying to embrace the invitation to fail, but also having that part of our mind and our conscience and our that is still here.
There's an exercise I lead people through in discipleship overall, and I lead myself through it a great deal as well. And that is, it's a process of digging, and it has to do with when there's something that's really bothering you or upsetting you. And that could be an interaction that you had with somebody. It could be something in your personal relationships. But let's look at it here in the ministry context of experiencing failure. So I am investing in this event. I've tried really hard to push this vision, this idea, and it is not coming to fruition. And that's really upsetting me. So when you're feeling those feelings of upset, disappointment, regret, shame, whatever, a question that I like to lead people into asking themselves is, why? Why is this bothering me? Well, I tried so hard and I worked on this event and just nobody showed up. That really bothers me. Well, why does that bother you? Well, it bothers me because I put all this effort and this energy and this hope and this dream into this, and it's not responding. In the mission field, it's not responding, and people aren't responding. Okay, well, why does that bother you? Well, it bothers me because I'm wondering, am I praying right or enough, or am I gifted enough for this, or am I talented enough for this, or am I organized enough for this, etc. And that's what's really got me upset, is I'm wondering those things. Okay, well, you're wondering those things. Well, why does that bother you? And then now you're starting to get into, at some point, if you do enough digging, if you do enough, why is that bothering you? You will discover that there is some lie that you are telling yourself, and that you may have been telling yourself for a very long time. And it will usually come down to, I am deeply worried over my belonging. That, do I belong in ministry? Do I belong in this community? It might be really bad news you've been telling yourself about your security, right? If I don't do this, then I don't get a job, I don't get income, and then this fear spiral takes over.
Yeah.
Or it could be really bad news you're believing about your significance.
Yeah, value, worth.
I am a loser. I
Yeah.
am not cut out for. And so at some point, you're getting to things like your belonging, or your security, your significance, your worth, or your value. You're telling yourself some bad news story. It exists in you subconsciously. And now this ministry challenge or undesired ministry outcome, it's just an instigating factor for some bad news thing that's already at work in you. And so the question that I then guide people to ask is, okay, Daniel Hawkins, Lance Marshall, you're 2015. You're really upset over all of the time, energy, other people's money, work that has gone into this, and it's not happening, and you feel like a failure, and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, you are feeling you're telling yourself some bad news story about your belonging, or your security, or your significance, or your worth, or your meaning, or your giftedness, etc. And the question I ask people is, what does Jesus have to say to somebody who's feeling that way right now?
Yeah.
What does Jesus have to say to Daniel in that moment, to Lance in that moment, to whoever's watching this video 6 months from now, who's saw failure and decided to read this or listen to it because they felt like it might be resonant? When you get down to the thing under the thing, under the thing, under the thing, under the thing, there's some bad news story you're telling yourself. And my question to you is, when you really name that, what's Jesus have to say to you right now? And I probably know, but let's let you listen and hear from him yourself.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that what he's going to say to you is going to be something that makes you feel a lot of hope and a lot of strength and a lot of peace and a lot of resilience and a lot of willingness to go try and again and again and again on his behalf, because so many more people need to experience this. And so I think when you do that work, when you do that digging, when you just name and uncover that bad news story you've been telling yourself, that this episode is just turning amplified up in your ears, and you let Christ confront that bad news with his good news, ain't no stopping you.
Amen. Amen. Lance, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
for that. I feel like I went to church just now, and so it has been an incredible gift. And thank you for being with us today on Pod Strangely Warmed. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even